According to numerous ancient texts and books written over the years, hundreds of thousands of years ago, before recorded history, planet Earth was visited by astronauts from a strange world. These beings, who settled in what is now the Persian Gulf, carried out activities to detect gold reserves in Southeast Africa and made a colonial expedition to Earth. Today, there are two types of people: those who look at the origins of the life from a scientific point of view and argue that life on Earth began millions of years ago and that humanity eventually evolved from microorganisms to an advanced species. Others argue that life was created by divine intervention. They argue that life on Earth is the result of God, a divine being who created everything: the Earth, the Moon, our solar system, and the entire universe. Basically, we were created according to religion by a far superior being. Genesis 1:21 says, "Thus God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God he created them, male and female he created them." We have two prevailing theories that explain what humanity is doing on Earth. Scientifically speaking, we still haven't found evidence of life anywhere else, so it's a bit difficult to test that theory. If we take a look at religion, we will find something that is practically impossible to prove. But there are millions of people scattered around the world who firmly believe that humanity and everything around us was created by God. If we discovered strange life in the solar system tomorrow, how would religion survive this discovery? Interestingly, there are several ancient texts that predate the Bible. For example, Popol Vuh, the sacred book of the ancient Mayans, that literally says that humanity was created by beings. These beings who created humanity are referred to in the Popol Vuh as the creator, the ancient, the dominator, the feathered serpent, those who beget, those who give being, hover over the water like a nascent light. In the Quran, we find the following. Verse 96. Read in the name of God who created man from a clinging substance. Read in your God the most generous, who taught by the pen, taught man what he did not know. This is why we ask again, who were these gods? Is it possible that some of the oldest writings on Earth from ancient Sumeria can help us understand the origin of humanity? If we put aside both theories mentioned above, we will find room for one more, which according to many is as acceptable as the previous two. Humanity, created by a civilization from another part of the universe. This controversial theory is as acceptable as the other two. Is ancient humanity a product of the ancient Anunnaki? What if the controversial Zecharia Sitchin was right? It begins with the planet Nibiru, whose long elliptical orbit brings it closer to Earth once every 3,600 years. The planet's inhabitants were human technologically advanced beings, standing about 9 feet tall. Sitchin said in a 2010 interview with the New York Times, "A few ago, for 50,000 years, they detected gold reserves in Southeast Africa and made a colonial expedition to Earth, settling in what is now the Persian Gulf." Mr. Sitchin added, "These Nibirites recruited erect primate workers from Earth to build 8 great cities. Enki, who became the Sumerian god of science, bestowed some of the advanced genetic makeup of the Nibirites on these bipeds so that they could work as miners." This is how Mr. Sitchin explains what scientists attribute to evolution. He says, "The alien cities were washed away in a great flood 30,000 years ago, after which they began passing on their knowledge to humans." He showed a photograph of a wood carving from 7000 BC of a large man handing over a plow to a smaller man. The passing of an agricultural knowledge. Anyway, he said, the Nibiruites finally jetted home in their spacecraft around 550 BC. This is in the text. I'm not making it up, Sitchin concluded. In his book, The Cosmic Code, Sitchin writes, "There was a time," the Sumerian said, "when civilized man was not yet on Earth, when animals were wild and undomesticated and crops were not yet cultivated. At that time, a long time ago, a group of 50 Anunnaki, led by a being whose name was Ea. They traveled from their home planet, Nibiru, and arriving on Earth, they landed in the waters of the Persian Gulf. This happened 445,000 years ago. The Anunnaki chronology coming to Earth, according to Sitchin. After long wars, the atmosphere of Nibiru began to deteriorate and became a hostile place for life. The Anunnaki needed gold to repair their atmosphere. According to the researchers, we can use gold nanoparticles to repair our damaged ozone layer. The Anunnaki aliens landed on Earth and established their base in Eridu, desiring to extract gold from the Persian Gulf. They were headed by Enki, son of Anu. Gold production fell, which caused Anu to come to Earth. At his side, his other son Enlil arrived. Anu decided what mining would take place in Africa and promoted Enlil in charge of the Terran mission. In southern Mesopotamia, there were 7 developed nations. Among the most important were Sippar, Nippur, Shuruppak. After refining the metal, the ore was transported from Africa with ships and sent into the orbit. Interestingly, the old list of Sumerian kings, one of the most interesting ancient texts ever found on our planet, detailing with great precision the rulers of the ancient Sumerian civilization, describes the kings' beings who ruled the earth for thousands of years. From the Sumerian king list, we read, after royalty descended from heaven, royalty was in Eridu. In Eridu, Alulim became king, ruled for over 28,800 years. Alaljar ruled for 36,000 years. 2 kings, they ruled for 64,800 years. This ancient document describes a time on earth when known beings lived for thousands of years and ruled the ancient cities of the region. Researchers have not been able to explain why the unique list combines to the mythical pre-dynastic rulers with the historical rulers known to have existed, and as such have mixed feelings when it comes to the interpretation of the Sumerian king list.
The most controversial ancient Sumerian text reveals the list of 8 ancient kings that are also known as gods, who descended from the sky and ruled for over 200,000 years. According to the text, before the Great Flood, a group of 8 intelligent beings ruled over Mesopotamia for a period of 241,200 years. The Sumerians were one of the ancient advanced civilization that lived around 7,000 years ago in Mesopotamia between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, which later became Babylonia and is now in Iraq and Syria. Many artifacts have been recovered from the ancient site of Sumerians in Iraq, but the most intriguing was the manuscript that recorded the listing of Sumer kings and their reign lengths. The clay tablet of this unique text is 4,000 years old and was found by German-American scholar Hermann Hilprecht at the beginning of the 20th century. Hilprecht found at least 18 such cuneiform tablets. They were not identical, but they shared the information that is believed to have been taken from a single source of Sumerian history. There are more than a dozen of copies of Sumerian king list found in Babylon, Susa, and Assyria, and the Royal Library of Nineveh from the 7th century BC. The list composed in the Sumerian language consists of the names of numerous generation kings who ruled ancient Mesopotamia, and also share the details of their supposed lengths and location of kingship. Along with the list, the text also included the events of the Great Flood, traditions, tales of Gilgamesh, and stories of antediluvian rulers. The Sumerian list before the flood. After the kingship descended from heaven, the kingship was in Eridu. In Eridu, Alulim became the king. He ruled for 28,800 years. Alaljar ruled for 36,000 years. 2 kings, they ruled for 64,800 years. Then Eridu fell, and the kingship was taken to Bad Tibera. In Bad Tibera, Enmenluana ruled for 43,200 years. Enmengal-Ana ruled for 28,800 years. Dumuzid, the shepherd, ruled for 36,000 years. 3 kings, they ruled for 108,000 years. Then Bad Tibera fell and the kingship was taken to Larag. In Larag, Ensipad-Zidana ruled for 28,800 years. 1 king, he ruled for 28,800 years. Then Larag fell and the kingship was taken to Zimbir. In Zimbir, Enmendurana became king. He ruled for 21,000 years. 1 king, he ruled for 21,000 years. Then Zimbir fell, and the kingship was taken to Shuruppak. In Shuruppak, Ubara Tutu became king. He ruled for 18,600 years. 1 king, he ruled for 18,600 years. In total, 5 cities and 8 kings. They ruled for 241,200 years. Then the flood swept over. How could the 8 kings rule the earth for 241,200 years. There was a great discussion on the long tenure of the early kings. The list mentions some mythical and legendary figures such as Atana, Lugalbanda, and Gilgamesh, who reigned for an implausible period of time. Some believed that they were indeed gods who had a longer lifespan than earthly beings. There is also a list of the rulers and their kingship after the flood. For many years, people believed that the history of 8 Sumerian kings and their implausible kingship, the Great Flood, and their replacement with another set of kings after the flood was just Sumerians' interpretation of mythological stories. At the same time, some researchers and authors dismissed this theory and suggested that the list cannot be a myth. They started recognizing some of the kings mentioned in the list. Interestingly, some scholars found striking similarities between the Sumerian king list and the book of Genesis. For example, likewise, the list discussed the 8 kings that ruled for generations. Before the flood, there is also mentioned about 8 generations that existed between Adam and Noah before the great destruction, and then after the flood, the longevity decreased. The Sumerian list mystery still baffles historians as it shares some perplexing facts that relate to the actual events. What if the list tells us the correct information and the heavenly gods really lived and ruled for such a long period of time? What if they possessed the technology to increase life expectancy and became immortal?